Today's discussion will be presented in 3 sections since we are recording it for a radio broadcast on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network. You're welcome to post questions and comments during the session, and we'll try to answer them online. I'd like to introduce our moderator, Jason Miller, Executive Editor at Federal News Network.
Welcome to the discussion today. My guests today are Adam Zimet, the Branch Chief for Identity, Credential, and Access Management at the Agriculture Department; Micah Segan, the Associate Deputy CIO for Cybersecurity at the Energy Department; Andrew Layfelt, the CDM Chief Strategist for Mobile Iron; and Stephen Boer, the Lead Mobile Systems Architect for Booz Allen Hamilton's CDM program. Gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. Before we get started, let me set some context for our discussion. The Homeland Security Department no longer talks about the Continuous Diagnostics and Mitigation, or CDM program, in terms of phases. After more than 6 years, the CDM program is now all about capabilities. The next set of capabilities CDM is aiming to provide to agencies over the next 12 to 18 months are focused around 4 areas: ongoing assessments, network access control, certificate management, and mobile security. For this discussion, we're going to really focus on mobile security and how that fits in with the CDM program. DHS says the goal is to give agencies visibility from their mobile device management systems by sending data to the agency-wide cyber dashboard so they have a greater understanding of their mobile devices and the risks they pose. DHS says initially it wants to focus on visibility of the devices themselves, so if there's a vulnerability on, say, an Android or an iPhone device, agencies will be able to see what risks they're facing. Over the longer term, DHS wants to help agencies with mobile application management so they can ensure agencies have the right protections in place to secure the entire mobile environment. In many ways, these new capabilities will help move agencies from the diagnostics portion of CDM into the mitigation side. Because like with all aspects of security, you can't manage mobile devices if you can't see them. So what will it take for agencies to implement these capabilities, and how will the integration of CDM and mobile devices continue to improve cybersecurity? Well, that's what our guests are going to tell us today. So gentlemen, CDM, it's one of my favorite topics. It's one of those things where I could talk all day just on CDM. But we're going to talk CDM and more. So let me start with Micah. Energy Department has been kind of moving along the path of CDM for several years now. You guys had some fits, some starts, some hiccups. What's the latest with CDM, and then we'll get into the mobile side.
Sure. So from the beginning, we saw CDM as a critical enabler for allowing us to implement true continuous monitoring across the department and give us really the full visibility for all of our sites. DOE is very distributed across the United States landscape, and it's very difficult for us in this truly federated environment to see everything. So CDM is helping us to be able to fill in those blanks, those gaps of visibility. So we have definitely found it to be beneficial. It's helping us to acquire tools that we haven't had the resources to acquire previously, and we're seeing the results in our visibility. And we hope that as we move into the mobility side, that we'll be able to extend that visibility out to the mobile.
And since you bring up mobility, let's just touch upon that real quick. What's for Energy Department, and when it comes to mobility, how big of a change is this going to be? I mean, right now, do you have visibility into mobility, and will CDM give you that visibility? Talk about that integration just briefly.
Sure, we have very little visibility for mobile devices. The first thing that most people do is come in and check their phone. They check their machine, which is more and more a laptop, or in my case is a tablet. And we don't have the same kind of visibility that we traditionally do for desktops and servers. So our hope is that we can get that same kind of visibility from CDM for the mobile devices that we have for the desktops and servers.
So Andrew, you just heard Micah kind of describe the hope, right? Talk maybe from your perspective what some of your federal customers are doing. Where is the market? What's the trends you're starting to see?
Right. Well, what I think we're seeing from industry is a lot of the leading industry mobility leaders like ourselves are looking at new approaches and innovative ways of supporting the ability to not only identify risks but also mitigate and remediate those risks before they pose a problem to the workforce or to the enterprise. So, from an industry perspective, what I'm experiencing and what I'm seeing within our customer base in the federal government is a lot of the agencies are struggling with the tool sets, the controls, the policies, and the ability to show compliance to a lot of the security requirements that these mandates are asking the agencies to support. So from a mobile device management perspective or a UEM perspective, what's really, I think, innovative, at least from a mobile iron perspective, is now we've integrated our ability to provide an umbrella of mobile threat defense, which in its essence is also a core element of CDM. So in effect, what we've done is transform our UEM platform into a CDM infrastructure that helps identify risks, known, unknown, as well as be able to automate the mitigation and remediation of those risks before they pose a problem to the enterprise. So these are all new developments that are coming to market. And I think as the government and industry collaborates and works together on identifying the gaps to these enterprise challenges, that we're going to have a full life cycle capability around CDM in the years to come.
Do you get a sense that as agencies are, like in Micah's case, that energy is struggling, or at least would like better visibility into the mobile devices? How common of a refrain do you hear that from other customers all the time, I imagine?
Yeah, it's pretty common. A lot of the emphasis around mobile device management historically has been, understanding whether you can trust the device, can manage the mobile apps on that device, and also be able to confirm the identity of those users that are accessing your enterprise assets. So from a mobile perspective and the visibility of the mobile side of the house, that's traditionally an optics that has been missing in not only the CDM dashboard, but the traditional visibility that the enterprise and these systems provide to the government.
Now, Adam, let me shift over to you and go back to kind of some of the government side of the house. One of the things that USDA has always been ahead of other agencies. I remember covering USDA years ago, and you guys were the first one to use two-factor authentication, single sign-on. I remember you guys were one of the first ones to get the HSPD-12 or PIV cards out to your employees much more quickly than everybody else. Mm-hmm. So I've always thought of USDA and a couple others as kind of head of the pack. Give me a sense, where does CDM, where are you with CDM today, and where does mobility fit in?
With CDM, we were also an early adopter, I think, of getting a lot of the CDM, especially with phase 1 capabilities in place. We've completed those implementations for phase 1 and phase 2 successfully, and are working to transition now into our expansion and continued integration of those capabilities throughout our enterprise. And we're looking forward to starting the phase 3 and looking forward to kind of the new format with DHS of more as-is assessment and tailoring of the resulting solutions to what our highest priority needs really are.
So it's interesting, phase 1 completed, phase 2 pretty well on its way, and now phase 3, and that's where the mobility side comes in. When I described of the 4 areas that DHS is really focusing on for what they call defend, mobility was one of them. Where does that fit in terms of your vision and what you hope to accomplish?
So where we're looking now is to go to the next step and to better manage devices and to better manage applications on the mobile devices and the data and the access associated with the data. And we're looking to phase 3 to help improve those capabilities throughout USDA.
So one of the things about CDM, and Steve's going to jump in here from Booz Allen to really put a finer point on this, is it's going to give you more visibility than maybe you had before, where the MDM and some of the other tools were helpful. This will combine it with the other data, so you can be like, oh, that attack vector is happening because of this mobile application or device, versus last time maybe with MDM, it's like, okay, there's something weird going on. I mean, I'll use the overused term, connecting the dots a little better.
Right. We saw mobile device management as kind of the initial foundation phase, and then expanding that to better protecting the applications themselves, including the vetting of those applications, the activity that those applications are or doing, or how those applications are behaving, and the governance around those devices as well.
Excellent. Steve, now Booz is in a great position in many ways because you guys have won at least one, if not 2, defend task orders. Correct me if I'm wrong, is it 2?
Right.
2. So that's roughly like 13 or 14 agencies you guys are working. So you get a broad spectrum of where agencies are and how they're working. Talk maybe about what you're seeing currently across the spectrum for CDM, and then we'll jump into mobility. First start with just CDM more broadly.
Sure. So for CDM as a whole, every agency has its own missions. It's a different architecture, different methodology of implementing their architectures, and we see some agencies have moved more into the cloud earlier than other agencies. We see on the mobile side, we see it as well. We see some agencies with well-defined mobile strategies. Some are just dipping their toes into mobile. Some have bring your own device models. Some have government furnished equipment models, and all of those different methodologies and missions are a big challenge for us as integrators to incorporate a solution that can be somewhat common across all the agencies. So that's probably our biggest challenge as an integrator.
And that's why DHS has changed the program so much. I wrote about this a couple of weeks ago, where they talked, they used to be really focused on almost this one size fits all, and now they're kind of stepping back and going, here's the big highway, just stay within the guardrails.
Right, and that's where that's been our focus of late, especially as we look to expand CDM capabilities into cloud and mobile, is looking at what agencies have, where gaps may be, and working with those agencies specifically on how to fill those gaps and extend CDM capabilities to cloud and mobile.
I was really surprised when you said that some agencies are just dipping their toes in mobile. I feel like we've been talking mobility for a decade. I mean, I don't know, why are some agencies still in that early stages?
I think it has to do with some agencies and the sensitivity of the data that they manage, and that they're willing to extend to mobile devices. Some agencies are more capable of implementing a bring your own device model, for instance, or some agencies have certain sensitivity data that they need to protect on the mobile device, and that requires a little bit more control and over that mobile device. Maybe they have to field their own devices with their own security parameters on it.
Adam, you're shaking your head a little bit. You feel the push and pull of mobile?
Yeah, and for USDA, mobile has been a kind of a really transformative technology as well. We're a very distributed organization. We're a lot of field employees and a lot of field work and a lot of customer-facing and citizen-facing work that we do as well. And mobile's been able to allow us to keep our field employees in the field longer, or more days a week, and it's been able to let us bring our services more directly to citizens and customers, cut down on paperwork, cut down on trips into the office to do work and access USDA services.
Micah, you're on the other end of the spectrum in some ways at Energy Department, where you're still very distributed, but a lot of what Energy does is obviously in that classified world, or at least very sensitive world. When are you surprised, as Stephen was saying, that are you one of those agencies that are just dipping your toes in mobile, generally speaking?
So obviously, we've had mobile for years, but we are really just now dipping our toes into how do we get our hands around managing that mobile and securing that mobile. Mobile devices are computers just like computers on our desk. Our smartphones and tablets are smarter than the satellites we put in space, right? And yet they have the least amount of protection. So when we talk about threat vectors, mobile is a huge threat vector, and yet it is one of the last things that cybersecurity has looked at and tried to conquer. So we're really trying to get our hands around that. And as with USDA, we have field employees. We have the power marketing administrations that distribute power to 30 million customers in the United States. We have field technicians out there with mobile phones doing work on their mobile phones. And when that device isn't secure and they bring it back, or when they're online, that's a huge threat vector for us. So we're really, unfortunately, we are really just dipping our toes into it, and it's a big concern for us.
And in many ways, for years, Energy and other agencies, you've had the basics, right? The calendaring, the email, but really not the apps. And that's the difference now, is that I think with like at USDA, a farmer can go out and gauge their crops and put it in an app and send it back to you guys, and that's really where the challenge is with you guys. If you're looking at an energy facility or some sort of someone's working on one of the national labs and wants to pull and connect an app to some data, that's where that challenge is now much more real than it was, again, 5-10 years ago.
Very correct. It's not just reading email, and it is really about taking your computer and all of your data access with you wherever you go, so that you can save time and be out in the field and not have to come back to the home location. As we said with National Labs, we also have a lot of researchers, so there is a huge push for bring your own device. right? And this is what people are comfortable with, and we need these researchers and other employees to be comfortable with what they're using. How do we secure somebody's personal device and still allow them to be able to do their job? That's a huge problem, which we're hoping that CDM can help us to overcome. But it is a big technology challenge.
Andrew, jump in.
Yeah, so Mobile Iron, I think, early in saw the challenges to securing not only the device, but also the communication, the Wi-Fi connections, as well as the mobile applications. And what we're seeing as agencies struggle with, again, extending their endpoints to the mobile workforce, is how do you protect against those risks, known and unknown, or zero-day attacks? And so as an innovator in this industry sector, Mobile Iron did something unprecedented. We actually integrated mobile threat defense into our UEM platform. And in essence, what that gave us is now the ability to provide organizations like USDA or Department of Energy or others a complete visibility and optics to not only the status and posture of the device, but also the communications, as well as the security posture and the mobile applications. So I think the hesitancy of agencies to fully embrace mobile and the mobile workforce and really understand the paradigm shift from traditional desktop computing architectures to mobile infrastructures can be, I think, benefit significantly from these new innovations and new developments that are happening in the cybersecurity industry, as well as within the UEM industry.
All right. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we can continue our conversation. You're listening to the panel discussion, The Intersection of CDM and Mobile Security in Government, sponsored by Mobile Iron on Federal News Radio, part of the Federal News Network.